What if the kindness you showed when no one was watching turned out to be the most important test of your life? In the gray heart of Milwaukee's industrial district, where factory smoke still clung to brick facades like stubborn memories, stood Sal's Diner, a relic from 1962 that time had forgotten to demolish. Every morning at exactly 5:47 a.m., before the sun bothered to show its face over Lake Michigan, the diner's fluorescent lights flickered to life with a reluctant buzz that sounded like exhaustion itself. The red vinyl booths bore the scars of thousands of conversations, knife cuts and cigarette burns forming constellations of human contact. Black and white checkered floor tiles had dulled to a uniform shade of resignation, and the air carried the perpetual smell of burnt coffee mixed with fryer grease. The scent of survival in a neighborhood where dreams came to die quietly. But something was about to happen in Booth 7 that would change everything. An old man with trembling hands and a coat turned gray from winters on the street had been coming here for months. And one waitress had been watching him when she thought no one was watching her. She was wrong. Emma Crawford had been working the opening shift at Sal's for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Not that she was counting. At 28, she moved through the diner with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had memorized every crack in the floor, every squeaky hinge, every temperamental burner on the ancient six-top stove. Her hands bore the small scars of the profession, burns from hot plates, cuts from rushed knife work, calluses from carrying trays that grew heavier with each passing year. The weight she carried wasn't just physical. Her mother's medical bills sat in a folder on her kitchen counter. $180,000 from 18 months of stage 3 cancer treatment. The number had stopped feeling real months ago. It had become abstract, a mathematical representation of desperation rendered in 12-point times New Roman on hospital letterhead. She paid what she could each month, watching the balance shrink with the speed of continental drift. The nursing school acceptance letter lived in her nightstand drawer, dated 4 years back, edges soft from being unfolded and refolded too many times. Tuition was $47,000. She'd done the math 1,000 different ways. Late at night, when sleep wouldn't come. Even with loans, even with grants, even with miracles, the numbers didn't work. Her efficiency apartment cost $675 a month. She survived on ramen, day-old bread from the diner, and the occasional luxury of eggs when they were on sale. Double shifts had become her religion. Her feet ached in ways that felt permanent, as if pain had moved into her bones and signed a lease. She counted pennies the way other people counted blessings, hoarding them against emergencies that came with depressing regularity. Kindness was all she had left to give. It cost nothing and meant everything, a currency that couldn't be repossessed or garnished or taken away. So she gave it freely, especially when no one was watching. The old man first appeared on a Tuesday in late September, when autumn had just begun its slow work of stripping the trees bare. He shuffled through the door at 6:15 a.m. exactly, moving like gravity had doubled its pull on his body alone. His face was a roadmap of hard years, weathered skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, deep-set eyes that had witnessed too much, and a jaw set in permanent resignation. His hands trembled as they gripped the back of Booth 7, gnarled fingers spotted with age, knuckles swollen from arthritis or cold or both. The coat he wore told its own story. Navy blue once, maybe decades ago, now faded to a mottled gray that matched the Milwaukee sky. It hung on his thin frame like a flag on a windless day, too large for what he'd become. He always chose Booth 7, never varied, never asked for a different seat even when closer tables sat empty. He'd lower himself onto the cracked vinyl with a grunt that spoke of old bones and older pain, then arrange himself with surprising precision, back straight despite the obvious cost, shoulders squared in a posture that whispered of military training from forgotten life. The coins came out next. Quarters, dimes, nickels arranged in small, meticulous stacks on a scratched formica table. He counted them twice, lips moving silently, calculating survival against dignity. His order never changed. Dry toast and coffee, the cheapest items on the menu. 87 cents of sustenance to carry him through another day the world had decided to ignore. Travis Morrison had been managing Sal's for 6 years, and in that time he'd perfected the art of viewing human beings as balance sheet entries. At 43, his face had settled into permanent disappointment. thin lips pursed in preemptive disapproval, eyes that scanned the dining room not for people, but for profit margins threatening to escape. He saw the old man as a problem the moment he walked through the door. Not a customer, not a human being in need, a liability. Someone who ordered the minimum, occupied valuable real estate during peak hours, and worst of all, made other customers uncomfortable with visible poverty. Those people, he'd say, loud enough for Emma to hear but quiet enough to maintain deniability. They see one warm place, and suddenly we're running a charity operation. Bad for business, Emma. Paying customers don't want to eat, where the desperate congregate. He watched the daily coffee pot consumption like a hawk circling wounded prey, counted every mistake plate that left the kitchen, and made notes in a small leather book he kept in his shirt pocket, evidence for performance reviews that felt more like prosecutions. When Emma showed the old man kindness, Travis saw insubordination. When she fed him, Travis saw theft. The first morning Emma brought him extra food. She'd wrapped it in the oldest lie in the service industry playbook. Kitchen messed up an order, she said, setting down a plate that held not just dry toast, but scrambled eggs, 2 strips of bacon, and a small portion of hash browns. It's just going to waste otherwise. The old man stared at the plate like it might explode. His eyes narrowed, searching her face for the angle, the catch, the humiliation that surely followed charity. Years on the street had taught him that kindness always came with a price tag. Sometimes money, sometimes dignity, always something. "I ordered toast," he said, each word careful and deliberate. "I know." Emma's voice stayed casual, already turning away. "But we can't serve it to anyone else now, and I'm not allowed to eat it. Your choice. Take it, or it goes in the trash." She walked away before he could argue, before gratitude could make this transactional. She'd learned that lesson from her mother during the worst of the cancer treatments. Sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone was the absence of witness to their need. The old man ate slowly, methodically, but he ate everything. Travis watched from behind the register, his jaw tight. When Emma passed him carrying a pot of coffee, he muttered just loud enough, "That's coming out of your paycheck, if it happens again." By Thursday, Brenda, the afternoon shift waitress with opinions she confused for personality, had noticed a pattern. "Your charity case is back," she announced when the old man shuffled in at 6:15. "Maybe you should just marry him and get it over with." Emma said nothing. She poured coffee and pretended not to hear. The cold snap hit Milwaukee in mid-October, the kind of temperature drop that turned the wind off Lake Michigan into something with teeth. Emma noticed the old man's coat first. The tear along the left shoulder had grown, exposing the thin layer of cotton batting inside that did nothing against the bitter cold. His lips had taken on a bluish tint, and the tremor in his hands had worsened to where lifting his coffee cup required both palms wrapped around the ceramic. That afternoon, Emma went home during her split shift and opened her closet. Her father's winter jacket still hung there, 3 years after the heart attack that had taken him. Heavy canvas lined with fleece, built for Wisconsin winters, built to last. She kept it because letting go felt like forgetting, but keeping it felt like hoarding warmth from someone who could use it. The next morning, she draped it over the coat, racked near the door, before the old man arrived. Not in his booth, not handed to him directly, just left there, anonymous as sunrise. At 6:15 a.m., the old man shuffled in wearing his threadbare navy coat. He sat in booth 7, ordered his coffee and toast, and said nothing, but his eyes had tracked the jacket on the rack. When Emma brought his coffee, she said nothing. When she brought his plate, eggs, bacon, hash browns disguised as kitchen mistakes, she said nothing. 20 minutes later, when he stood to leave, he walked to the coat rack. His weathered hand touched the canvas, feeling its weight, its warmth. He looked back at Emma once. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 weeks of daily encounters, a moment of acknowledgement that passed between them without words. The next morning, he wore the jacket, and when he sat down in booth 7, he nodded once. Small, sharp, precise. Emma nodded back. By November, the pattern had calcified into ritual. 6:15 a.m., every single morning, the old man arrived. Booth 7, always booth 7. Emma had memorized his preferences without ever asking. 3 strips of bacon arranged at 7 o'clock on the plate, eggs scrambled soft with black pepper, but no salt. Hash browns cooked until the edges crisp but the center stayed tender. Coffee with exactly 2 creams. She never acknowledged the extra food. He never thanked her. They found a language beyond words, a vocabulary of dignity that required no translation. The mockery from her co-workers intensified. Emma's boyfriend is here, Brenda would sing out when he walked in. Better make sure his eggs are perfect. The cook had started calling the daily breakfast the charity special, and Travis had begun timing how long the old man occupied booth 7, muttering about turnover rates. In December, Travis cornered Emma by the coffee station. "I'm 2 seconds from banning that bum," he said, his voice low and sharp. "He's costing us money and reputation." Emma met his eyes. "He pays for what he orders." "Barely." Travis walked away, but Emma continued anyway. Every morning, every single morning. February marked month 5 of the ritual. Emma had served the old man breakfast 147 times. Not that she was counting. She knew the sound of his shuffle before the door opened, knew the exact creak of booth 7's vinyl when he sat down, knew the weight of silence that meant he was ready for coffee. On Thursday morning, 6:15 a.m. came and went. Booth 7 remained empty. Emma told herself it meant nothing. People got sick. People overslept. People had reasons. But her eyes kept drifting to the door between orders, and the knot in her stomach tightened with each passing minute. 6:30 came, then 7 o'clock, then 8 o'clock. The breakfast rush filled every booth except 7, and Emma found herself guarding it like sacred ground, turning away customers who tried to sit there. "Anyone seen the old guy who usually sits here?" she asked during the lull around 9. The regulars shrugged, already forgetting someone they'd never really seen. Travis overheard from behind the register. "Good riddance," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Maybe he finally froze to death somewhere and saved us the trouble of calling the cops to remove him. Something sharp twisted in Emma's chest. Grief disguised as anger. Or maybe the other way around. She'd never known his name. Never knew where he went after leaving the diner. Never knew anything except that for 5 months he'd been there. And now he wasn't. And the absence felt like a hole punched to the morning routine. Friday, 6:15 a.m. Empty booth. Emma's concern calcified into genuine worry. Saturday, still nothing. She caught herself staring at the door so intently that she burned a customer's hash browns and forgot to refill the cream dispensers. Mistakes that never happened. Mistakes that proved something had shifted. Sunday morning, Emma arrived at 5:30 instead of 5:45, hoping maybe he'd come early. She'd even plated his breakfast before 6. 3 strips of bacon, eggs scrambled soft, hash browns with crispy edges, coffee with 2 creams, and watched it grow cold while booth 7 mocked her with its emptiness. By noon, she'd made a decision. After her shift, she'd check the hospitals. Milwaukee had 4 within reasonable distance. Someone had to know something. Someone had to care that a man who'd existed in careful routine had simply vanished. But she never made it to the hospitals, because at 10:47 a.m. on Monday morning, everything changed. The morning rush had peaked and begun its descent into the late breakfast lull. Emma was refilling coffee for a contractor at table 3 when the door opened with enough force to make the bell above it sound like an alarm. 6 men entered in formation, not walking, moving with the kind of synchronized precision that spoke of military training or executive protection details. All of them built like they'd spent careers absorbing physical threats meant for other people. Dark suits cut to accommodate shoulder holsters, earpieces with coiled wires disappearing into collars, sunglasses despite the gray Milwaukee morning. The diner fell silent in the way that only happens when predators enter spaces designed for prey. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the sizzling griddle behind the counter seemed to hush, as if the laws of physics had decided to pay attention to whatever was about to happen. Travis emerged from his office, his face cycling through confusion to fear to forced authority in the span of 3 seconds. "Gentlemen," he started, his voice cracking slightly, "we have a seating policy." None of them looked at him. Their eyes swept the diner with professional assessment, cataloging exits and potential threats, before settling on a single target. Emma. The formation parted like a curtain to reveal a 7th man she hadn't noticed behind the wall of muscle. He was older, late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver hair swept back from a face that belonged in corporate boardrooms and country clubs. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Emma, made in 6 months. The Italian leather briefcase in his left hand gleamed like it had been polished that morning. He ignored Travis completely, ignored the gawking customers, ignored Brenda, who'd frozen with a pot of coffee suspended in midair like a statue titled Waitress Interrupted. He walked directly to Emma at the counter, his expensive shoes clicking against the checker tile with metronomic precision. Up close, she could see his eyes, steel gray, sharp, assessing her with the kind of attention usually reserved for contracts and quarterly reports. "Are you Emma Louise Crawford?" His voice carried the neutral authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Emma's throat had gone dry. She managed a nod, then found her voice buried somewhere beneath the confusion and rising panic. "Yes, I'm Emma. Who?" He reached into his jacket. The bodyguard's hands all twitched toward their own, and produced a business card, cream-colored with embossed lettering. He placed it on the counter between them with the gravity of serving legal papers. "Marcus Whitfield, senior partner, Whitfield and Associates." His eyes never left hers. "I represent the estate of Samuel James Hartley." The name meant nothing to Emma. She stared at the card, at the gold lettering, at the downtown Milwaukee address that probably meant corner offices and six-figure retainers. Behind her, the entire diner held its breath. Travis had gone pale. Brenda's mouth hung open, and Emma's world began to tilt sideways. Marcus Whitfield stood like a man who delivered difficult news before, shoulder square, spine straight, expression carefully neutral in the way lawyers practiced in mirrors until genuine emotion became optional. He was in his late 50s, but carried himself with the vitality of someone who paid personal trainers obscene amounts to forestall mortality. His silver hair was cut with the precision of someone who had standing weekly appointments. The watch on his wrist was understated but undoubtedly expensive, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. "Miss Crawford," he continued, his tone formal but not unkind, "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. Time is of the essence in matters such as these, and I was instructed to locate you immediately." Emma's hands gripped the counter's edge. "I don't understand. Who is Samuel Hartley? Why are you?" "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private?" Marcus glanced around the diner, at the sea of faces watching with undisguised fascination, at Travis hovering behind the register, trying to look authoritative, while clearly terrified. "No." Emma's voice came out stronger than she felt. "Whatever this is, just tell me, please." Marcus studied her for a long moment, something flickering across his professional mask. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He nodded once, accepting her terms. "Very well." He straightened, and the diner leaned in collectively. "I regret to inform you that Mr. Samuel James Hartley passed away peacefully 3 nights ago at Mercy General Hospital. He was 74 years old." The words took several seconds to penetrate. Emma's mind fumbled with the information, trying to attach the formal name to someone she knew. Samuel James Hartley. She'd never heard that name before in her life. But 3 nights ago, Thursday, the first day he didn't show up. "The old man," she whispered. "Booth 7. That was Samuel?" The grief hit her sideways, unexpected, overwhelming, completely disproportionate to someone she'd barely known. Tears blurred her vision before she could stop them, and her throat closed around words that wouldn't come anyway. She'd never known his name, never knew where he lived or what his life looked like beyond the 40 minutes he spent in booth 7 each morning. Never knew anything except that he was there, reliably daily, until he wasn't. And now she knew why. "I'm sorry," Emma managed, her voice breaking. "I didn't even know his name. I should have asked. I should have." "He spoke of you often in his final days," Marcus said quietly, and something in his professional mask cracked just slightly, a glimpse of genuine emotion beneath the lawyer's armor. Quite extensively, actually. Emma looked up sharply. "That's impossible. He never spoke. I mean, he ordered coffee and toast, but we never had a conversation. Not once. Not in 5 months." Marcus's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. "Miss Crawford, Samuel James Hartley was many things. Wealthy, powerful, notoriously private. But he was never a man who failed to notice what mattered. He noticed you. He noticed everything you did. And in his final instructions, he was remarkably specific about the kindness you showed him every single morning. Behind Emma, someone's coffee cup clattered against a saucer. Travis had moved closer, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Brenda stood frozen, the coffee pot still suspended in her hand like a prop she'd forgotten she was holding. Final instructions? Emma's voice barely qualified as a whisper. Marcus picked up his briefcase, clicked it open, and withdrew a leather portfolio embossed with his firm's name. Mr. Hartley's final will and testament contains provisions that require your immediate presence. The reading is scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon at our offices downtown, Marcus continued, his tone shifting back into pure professional efficiency. Your presence is not optional. It's a legal requirement of the estate settlement. Mr. Hartley was quite insistent on this point. Emma's mind reeled, trying to process information that refused to make sense. There must be some mistake. I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress who showed extraordinary kindness to a man everyone else dismissed, Marcus interrupted, and the steel in his voice suggested this wasn't a debate. Mr. Hartley made no mistakes, Miss Crawford. His instructions were precise, detailed, and legally binding. If you refuse to attend, the entire estate goes into probate, and several $100 million will be tied up in court for the next decade. Several $100 million. The number was so absurd it didn't feel real. Travis had pushed his way to the counter, his face red. Now hold on just a minute. If Emma did something to manipulate an elderly. One of the bodyguards shifted position slightly. Travis's voice died mid-sentence. Marcus's eyes never left Emma. Miss Crawford, we need to leave now. Do you require time to change, or shall we proceed as you are? Emma looked down at her stained uniform, at the coffee splashes and grease spots that mapped out her morning. I don't have anything else. This is what I wear. That will be fine. Marcus gestured toward the door. Shall we? Wait. Emma's voice stopped him. How do I know this is real? How do I know you're not, scamming me somehow? For the first time, something like approval crossed Marcus's face. A reasonable question. He reached into the portfolio and withdrew a single sheet of paper, placing it on the counter. Mr. Hartley anticipated your skepticism. He asked me to relay specific details that only someone who observed you very carefully would know. He consulted the paper, though Emma suspected he'd memorized it already. 3 strips of bacon, never 2, never 4. Always placed at the 7 o'clock position on the plate. Eggs scrambled soft, never firm, never runny. Black pepper, never salt. Hash browns cooked until the edges achieve a specific level of crispness, while the center remains tender. Coffee with exactly 2 creams, never sugar. And you cut the toast diagonally, not straight across, because Mr. Hartley mentioned only once 5 weeks in, that diagonal cuts were easier to handle with trembling hands. Emma's legs went weak. She gripped the counter harder. You also, Marcus continued, his voice softer now, left your late father's winter jacket on the coat rack in November. You thought no one noticed. Mr. Hartley noticed. He wore it every day until he passed. The diner had gone so quiet that Emma could hear her own heartbeat. He noticed everything, Miss Crawford. Every act of kindness. Every moment of grace. Every time you chose compassion when it would have been easier to look away. The test was real. She'd been watched for 5 months. The black Mercedes S-Class waited at the curb like a panther at rest, sleek, powerful, completely out of place on Industrial Boulevard. One of the bodyguards opened the rear door, and Emma hesitated before climbing in, acutely aware of her worn sneakers and stained uniform. The interior smelled of leather and new car and money, a scent she associated with dealership showrooms she'd never dream of entering. The seats were heated despite the mild February day. Water bottles sat in gleaming cup holders. The windows were tinted so dark that the gray Milwaukee morning transformed into twilight. Marcus settled in beside her with the ease of someone who traveled this way daily. The bodyguards filled the other vehicles, 2 black SUVs, 1 in front, 1 behind. A 3-car convoy for a waitress who took the bus. The drive cut through Milwaukee like a knife, through layers of economic strata. They left the industrial district with its boarded windows and graffitied walls, crossed through the struggling neighborhoods where Emma's efficiency apartment sat, then entered the downtown corridor where glass towers reflected clouds and ambition in equal measure. The lake appeared on the left, Lake Michigan stretching gray, and endless to a horizon that looked like possibility. Emma caught her reflection in a tinted window. Stained uniform, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, dark circles under her eyes from double shifts and worry. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd been working since 5:45 a.m. and hadn't expected anything beyond another 14-hour day. She felt like a stray cat someone had picked up and dropped into a palace. The building rose 43 stories above downtown Milwaukee, all glass and steel and architectural ego. The lobby alone was larger than Emma's entire apartment. Marble floors polished to a mirror finish, original artwork on the walls that probably cost more than her mother's medical bills, a reception desk that looked carved from a single piece of mahogany. The elevator was glass-walled, offering a view of the city dropping away beneath them as they rose. Emma watched the numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, until they stopped at 42. The doors opened directly into Whitfield and Associates. Hushed wealth greeted them, thick carpet that swallowed sound. More original artwork, a reception area with furniture that belonged in museums. Everything spoke the same language, money and lots of it, and the kind of power that money bought when you had enough of it for long enough. Marcus led her past curious glances from impeccably dressed staff members, down a hallway lined with photographs of partners shaking hands with politicians and CEOs, until they reached a conference room that faced Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. The mahogany table could have seated 20. Leather chairs surrounded it like thrones. Legal pads and pens sat at precise intervals. Though Emma suspected no one actually used the pens, they looked too expensive to risk running out of ink. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished table surface. She noticed her worn sneakers, the frayed collar of her uniform, the way she held herself, shoulders hunched, making herself smaller, taking up less space in a room designed for people who commanded it. "Please sit anywhere," Marcus said, gesturing to the chairs. Emma chose the one closest to the door, an escape route her subconscious had already mapped. She was offered coffee from a silver service that looked like it belonged in Buckingham Palace. She accepted the cup but couldn't bring herself to drink from it, certain she'd somehow break something that cost more than her monthly rent. Through the windows, Milwaukee spread out below like a game board. Somewhere down there, Sal's Diner was serving the lunch rush without her. The door opened with enough force to make Emma flinch. The man who entered carried entitlement like a scent. Expensive cologne mixed with barely contained rage. He was 42, but looked older, soft around the middle despite the clearly expensive suit that tried to hide it. His Rolex caught the light, too large on his wrist, screaming wealth instead of suggesting it. His face had settled into a permanent scowl, lines carved deep around his mouth from years of disapproval. His eyes swept the room with the look of someone mentally calculating what everything cost, and whether he deserved it more than whoever currently possessed it. "This is taking too long, Marcus," he snapped, not bothering with greetings. "I have a 3 o'clock tea time and—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Emma. His expression cycled through confusion to disbelief to something that looked like personal offense. "This is who we've been waiting for? A waitress?" His voice dripped with the kind of contempt that came naturally to people who'd never worried about money a day in their lives. Uncle Samuel must have completely lost his mind. "Crystal, are you seeing this?" The woman who followed him through the door was a study in designer everything. Handbags, shoes, dress, jewelry. Even her sympathy looked purchased. She made a show of dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue that probably cost more than Emma's weekly grocery budget. "Oh, Brandon, don't be cruel," Crystal said in a voice that suggested she'd practiced carrying a mirror until it sounded almost genuine. "I'm sure this poor girl is as confused as we are." She turned to Emma with a smile that didn't reach her Botoxed forehead. "Did you know Samuel well, dear?" Before Emma could answer, Brandon had rounded the table. "I swear to God, Marcus, if this is some kind of elaborate con, if this nobody somehow manipulated my uncle in his final days." "Mr. Hartley's mind was sharp until his final breath," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze nitrogen. "I would advise you to remember that before making accusations, you cannot substantiate." Brandon's jaw clenched, but he dropped into a chair across from Emma, his eyes boring into her like he could intimidate the truth into being what he wanted it to be. Emma shrank further into her seat, wishing she could disappear entirely. Two more people entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees despite the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Patricia Hartley Morrison swept in wearing pearls and indignation in equal measure. She was Samuel's cousin, 61 years old, and carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who'd attended finishing school and never quite finished being finished. Her eyes landed on Emma with a look reserved for stains on expensive carpet. "I flew in from Phoenix for this," she announced to no one in particular. "Canceled my bridge tournament. I certainly hope this won't take long." She settled into a chair with the air of someone performing a great sacrifice. "I visited Uncle Samuel faithfully over the years. Twice at least. He always said family loyalty meant everything." The man who followed looked like Brandon's slightly deflated brother. Same genetic material, worse outcome. Kyle Hartley was 38 and drowning, though he'd dressed up for the drowning in a suit that almost hid the desperation. Emma recognized the look in his eyes because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. Someone one crisis away from catastrophe, holding on by fingernails worn down to nothing. He didn't say anything, just nodded at Marcus and took a seat, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. Crystal had pulled out her phone and was scrolling through what looked like real estate listings. "That Aspen property is still available," she murmured to Brandon. "If this goes quickly, we could make an offer today." Patricia was discussing vacation homes with no one who was listening. Kyle was staring at his hands. Brandon was glaring at Emma like she'd personally stolen something from him. Not one of them looked sad. Not one of them mentioned Samuel beyond the context of what he'd left behind. Emma had never felt so out of place in her entire life. Marcus Whitfield opened the leather portfolio with the deliberate precision of someone who'd conducted hundreds of these readings and found no pleasure in any of them. He withdrew a document thick enough to represent serious wealth, adjusted his reading glasses, and began in the measured tone attorneys used when delivering news designed to wound. "I, Samuel James Hartley, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The legal language rolled out in its formal cadence. Declarations of competence, revocations of previous wills, appointments of executors. Brandon's leg bounced with impatience. Patricia checked her watch. Marcus turned to page 7. "To my nephew, Brandon Michael Hartley, I bequeath the sum of $2 million to be held in trust with the following conditions. Funds to be distributed quarterly, contingent upon employment verification and proof of financial responsibility as determined by the trustee." Brandon's face went through several colors. $2 million? In trust? With conditions. His voice climbed an octave. Uncle Samuel was worth over $300 million. "To my cousin, Patricia Hartley Morrison," Marcus continued without acknowledging the outburst, "I bequeath $1,500,000. The principal amount is to remain untouched for a period of 5 years, with only interest available during that time." Patricia's hand flew to her pearls. 5 years? That's absurd. "I have expenses," Samuel promised. "To Kyle Richard Hartley, I bequeath $500,000 to be managed by a professional trustee due to documented financial irresponsibility. Monthly distributions not to exceed $5,000. Kyle's face flushed red, but he said nothing. The shame of having your failures documented in legal language kept him quiet. Brandon shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a scream. "That's it? That's all? We're family. We have rights. Uncle Samuel told me. He promised the estate would." "I would remind you," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could crack steel, "that Mr. Hartley was under no legal obligation to leave you anything at all. These are gifts, not entitlements." Crystal grabbed Brandon's arm, pulling him back into a seat. "This is insulting," she hissed. "We were promised the estate. The house in Fox Point alone is worth." "There are additional provisions," Marcus said calmly. "If you'll allow me to continue." Marcus turned the page, and something in his expression shifted, softened, maybe, or perhaps just became less rigidly professional. "To Emma Louise Crawford, I bequeath the sum of $250,000, unrestricted and immediately available upon the execution of this will." The room erupted. Brandon shot to his feet again, this time with enough force to knock his chair backward. $250,000? To some random waitress? His voice had gone shrill, bouncing off the marble floors and expensive artwork. This is insane. She's nobody. She manipulated him. Hal found his voice, panic, overriding shame. A senile old man vulnerable and she. This is textbook elder abuse. Patricia's pearls rattled as she stood. We'll contest this. We have grounds. No court would. Their voices overlapped into a chorus of greed and outrage and desperation. All of it washing over Emma like a wave she couldn't swim against. She sat frozen, the number refusing to compute. $250,000. She tried to attach meaning to it, but her brain kept shorting out on the impossibility. Her mother's medical bills were $180,000. She'd calculated that number so many times it had burned into her consciousness like a brand. Nursing school was $47,000. Together, $227,000. The math that had kept her awake for years. The weight that pressed down on every decision, every double shift, every moment of exhausted despair. She could pay all of it, every cent, with money left over. Enjoy your blood money, waitress. Brandon spat across the table, his face twisted with hatred. Because I promise you we will fight this. We will drag you through every court in Wisconsin. We will. Mr. Hartley, Marcus interrupted, and the steel in his voice could have cut diamonds. One more threat directed at Miss Crawford, and I will have security escort you from these premises. Your uncle's mental competence has been thoroughly documented by 3 independent physicians. His intentions are crystal clear, and your behavior is demonstrating precisely why he structured the will as he did. Brandon's mouth snapped shut, but his eyes promised violence. Emma couldn't breathe. The number kept echoing. $250,000. Life-changing. Freedom. Her mother's medical bills gone. Nursing school possible. A future that looked like something other than endless shifts and survival. But Marcus wasn't finished. In addition, Marcus continued, his eyes scanning the document, to Emma Louise Crawford. I also bequeath the property located at 2847 Industrial Boulevard, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, along with all fixtures, equipment, and associated assets contained therein. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Brandon started laughing, a sound like glass breaking, sharp and mean and delighted. He left to that dump. He turned to Crystal, his expression transforming from rage to something worse. Pity mixed with mockery. Oh my God, he left her Sal's diner. That rat trap hasn't turned a profit in a decade. Crystal's face lit up with cruel amusement. The building's falling apart. I'm surprised it hasn't been condemned. The health inspector probably visits weekly. Kyle leaned back, some of the tension draining from his shoulders. That place isn't worth the back taxes. Uncle Samuel basically left her a liability. Cruel joke, honestly. Patricia sniffed. The man clearly deteriorated more than we realized, leaving a fortune to strangers, worthless property to waitresses. We should sue for mental incompetence. This proves it. Emma's confusion had reached critical mass. Why would Samuel own Sal's diner? The place was ancient, held together by habit and stubbornness. Travis had mentioned the owner once, some corporation or holding company, but never said it was Samuel. Why would a wealthy man own a failing diner in the industrial district? Marcus produced another document from his portfolio, a property deed, yellowed with age, dated 1962. He placed it on the table where everyone could see. Mr. Hartley purchased the property 63 years ago and has owned it continuously since. Exactly, Brandon said, his mockery reaching new heights. He held onto a worthless asset for sentimental reasons and dumped it on the waitress who brought him free food. At least he didn't burden family with that albatross. The Hartleys relaxed visibly. Brandon settled back in his chair, some of his rage cooling into smugness. Patricia's mouth curved into something approximating satisfaction. Even Kyle looked relieved, as if Emma's consolation prize made his own modest inheritance feel more substantial by comparison. They thought this was it. The twist concluded. The fortune divided unequally, but acceptably, with the interloper receiving a worthless building and a modest Sumwall family retained their rightful, if reduced, claims to the estate. Emma stared at the deed, trying to understand why Samuel would do this. The diner was where they'd met, where she'd served him every morning. But ownership? It made no sense. Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Anticipation, maybe, or the lawyer's equivalent of satisfaction. "There's more," he said quietly, and the room fell silent again. Marcus's voice cut through the settling murmur like a blade finding its mark. "Included with the Industrial Boulevard property is the investment portfolio attached to said property, currently valued at approximately $47 million. Silence. Absolute, complete, suffocating silence. Brandon's smug expression froze mid-formation, his mouth still curved in mockery that suddenly belonged to the wrong scene. The color drained from his face in stages, from red to pink to the gray-white of old snow. "What portfolio?" Patricia's whisper barely qualified as sound. Marcus adjusted his glasses, consulting the document with the calm of someone delivering weather reports instead of financial earthquakes. Sal's Dine, located at 2847 Industrial Boulevard, was Mr. Hartley's first restaurant, opened in 1962. He built it with his own hands, served as cook and dishwasher and manager. It became the foundation for what grew into Hartley Restaurant Group, 73 locations across 12 states at its peak. Crystal's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against the mahogany table. In 1998, Mr. Hartley sold the majority operating stake in Hartley Restaurant Group for approximately $180 million. However, he retained the original property and a controlling interest in the investment portfolio built on that foundation. The portfolio currently includes commercial real estate holdings valued at $23 million, franchise agreements generating approximately $1.2 million annually, and corporate bonds and securities totaling the remainder. Hal had gone so still he might have stopped breathing. "The original Sal's Diner," Marcus continued, and something almost like poetry entered his voice, served as Mr. Hartley's anchor property. He returned to it repeatedly throughout his life. He never sold it, never leveraged it, never allowed corporate restructuring to touch it. It was, in his own words, his reminder of what mattered before the empire obscured the foundation. He looked directly at Emma, whose face had gone blank with shock beyond processing. "Miss Crawford, you don't own a failing diner. You own the seed that grew into a fortune. And Mr. Hartley has left you not just a property, but the entire investment apparatus that grew from it." Marcus paused, letting the weight settle. It wasn't a cage. It was a kingdom. Brandon made a sound, not quite a word, more like something dying. Patricia's pearls rattled as her hand flew to her throat. Kyle's had dropped into his hands, and Emma sat frozen, the number floating in the air like smoke. $47 million, plus the $250,000 in cash, plus the property, plus the freedom to never worry about money again for the rest of her life. The test hadn't just been about kindness. It had been about who deserved the empire. Marcus produced a small silver key from his pocket, placing it on the table in front of Emma with the gravity of passing down a sacred artifact. "Mr. Hartley's private study is located on the 43rd floor, one level above this office. He hasn't allowed anyone access to that room in 17 years. Not family, not staff, not even cleaning services. His instructions were explicit. Upon his death, only you were to be given entry." Emma's hand trembled as she picked up the key. The metal was warm from Marcus's pocket, small and ordinary and somehow weighted with significance beyond its physical mass. "I don't understand," she managed, her voice barely carrying across the table. "Why me?" "Perhaps," Marcus said gently. "The answer's upstairs." The ride to the 43rd floor lasted 15 seconds and felt like 15 years. The bodyguard stayed behind. Marcus accompanied her but remained silent, offering no explanations, no preparation for what she'd find. The floor was different from the corporate elegance below. Quieter, older, more personal. A single door faced the elevator, unmarked and solid. Emma's hand shook as she fitted the key into the lock. The mechanism turned with a click that sounded like a door opening onto a past she'd never known existed. The room beyond wasn't an executive office. It was something else entirely, smaller, more cramped, with walls covered in corkboard and photographs pinned in clusters. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A desk held notebooks, all filled with cramped handwriting. More photographs scattered across every surface. This wasn't an office. It was a war room, a place where someone had planned something for years, with the patience of someone who knew exactly what they were searching for and refused to settle for anything less. Emma stepped inside, and 17 years of secrets waited to be discovered. The photographs told a story that unfurled like tragedy rendered in still images. Samuel, younger, smiling, whole, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and auburn hair. Catherine Hartley, according to the inscription, dated 1973. Wedding day. More photos. Samuel and Catherine at the original Sal's Diner, covered in flour and laughing. The grand opening banner hung crooked behind them. Catherine serving coffee to customers who looked like neighbors rather than transactions. Both of them young and full of the kind of hope that came before life taught you better. Then a new face appeared in the timeline. A girl who grew through the photographs from infant to toddler to teenager to young woman. Rebecca. Same kind eyes as her mother. Same gentle smile. In dozens of images she worked at Sal's, serving food, talking to customers, organizing what looked like community events. One photo showed her handing bag lunches to a line of homeless individuals outside the diner. Another captured her teaching someone to read, patient and focused. She turned the restaurant into something more than profit, a place where people mattered. A news clipping, yellowed and brittle. Catherine Hartley, 47, killed in automobile accident. January 1995. Samuel standing at a funeral, looking like something fundamental had been extracted from his chest. More photos. Just Samuel and Rebecca now. The light in the images somehow dimmed even as they continued building the restaurant empire. Rebecca at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, but always steering conversations toward community programs, food banks, hiring initiatives for struggling individuals. Then the timeline ended abruptly. Another news clipping. Rebecca Hartley, 32, died peacefully at Mercy General Hospital following complications from congenital heart condition. May 2008. The photographs after that showed a different Samuel, older, hollow, moving through corporate meetings like a ghost haunting his own life. Then a document. Sale of Hartley Restaurant Group. Majority stake. $180 million. Dated 6 months after Rebecca's death. The final cluster of photographs showed something else. Sal's Diner, recent, with notes in Samuel's handwriting. Corporate vultures turned it into profit machine. Rebecca's vision died when she did. Can't bear to watch them destroy what she built. Looking for someone who understands. Someone who has Rebecca's heart. He'd spent 17 years searching for someone worthy of carrying forward what his daughter had believed in. Emma found the photograph tucked into a frame on Samuel's desk. Her own face, captured through the diner window, serving breakfast to the old man in booth 7. She hadn't known anyone was photographing him. Below it, a note in Samuel's handwriting. She has Rebecca's heart. More photos showed Emma from different angles, different days, always focused on serving him, never noticing the documentation. Security camera stills, probably. He'd been watching her watch him, collecting evidence of character displayed when no one was supposed to be looking. She did resemble Rebecca, Emma realized, studying the photographs side by side. Same build, same way of holding herself, same gentle manner in how they interacted with others. But the resemblance felt incidental, not causal. Samuel hadn't chosen her because she looked like his daughter. He'd chosen her because she acted like his daughter. The letter sat in the center of the desk, sealed in an envelope, with her name written in that same cramped handwriting. Emma's hands shook as she opened it. Dear Emma, you don't know me, but I know you. For 5 months, I watched you choose kindness when it cost you. Your manager threatened your job. Your coworkers mocked you. You were tired, broke, struggling, drowning in bills that would break most people. But you fed a grumpy old man anyway, not because you expected reward, not because anyone was watching, but because it was right. My daughter Rebecca believed businesses should measure success not in profits, but in people served. She built community into every restaurant we opened. She fed the hungry, hired the struggling, saw humans instead of transactions. The corporate vultures couldn't understand that. They wanted quarterly returns and stockholder satisfaction. They turned my restaurants into profit machines, squeezing efficiency from places that used to have souls. I sold rather than watch them destroy what you built. I took the money and walked away because the empire without Rebecca's heart in it was just greed wearing my daughter's name. But Rebecca's real legacy isn't buildings or brands. It's the belief that kindness matters more than profit, that character matters more than wealth, that how we treat the invisible people in our lives defines who we are far more than any balance sheet. And then I found you, watching you serve breakfast while your own life fell apart, watching you choose compassion when cynicism would have been easier, watching you feed someone everyone else had decided to ignore. You passed a test you didn't know you were taking. The money is for your freedom. The property is for your heart. The empire is for your future. Don't let them take it. Don't let them make it about greed again. Make it about people. Make it about kindness. Make Rebecca's dream live again. Now comes the harder part, proving character with power, showing that wealth doesn't corrupt what poverty couldn't break. I believe you can do this. I believe you're exactly who Rebecca would have chosen. Samuel? Emma read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the ink, before she finally understood. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a mission. Emma made the phone call from her apartment floor at 11:37 p.m., 3 days after the will reading. She'd been staring at her bank account on her laptop screen for 20 minutes, watching the numbers that still didn't feel real. $250,000. Deposited. Available. Hers. Her mother answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep and worry. Calls after 9 always meant bad news. Mom, Emma said, and her voice cracked immediately. Mom, I paid them. All of it. Every bill. The hospital, the specialists, the follow-up treatments. It's done. You're clear. Silence. Then a sound Emma hadn't heard in 4 years. Her mother crying without the weight of debt crushing the tears into something harder. How did you? Her mother couldn't finish. Emma sat on the worn carpet of her efficiency apartment. Back against the couch she'd bought third-hand, and wept. Not sad tears. Something else entirely. Years of pressure releasing at once. The constant calculation of survival versus dignity finally, mercifully ending. Her body shook with it. For years of held breath, finally exhaling. She enrolled in nursing school the following Monday. The acceptance letter she'd kept in her nightstand drawer, edges soft from handling, hope worn thin from waiting, finally got to mean something. That night, she slept without the financial terror that had lived in her chest since the day her mother's diagnosis arrived. 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep, dreamless and deep. The kind that came when your body finally believed survival wasn't a daily negotiation anymore. Freedom tasted like tears and felt like breathing after drowning. Emma returned to Sal's the next morning at her usual time, 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before opening. She debated staying away, starting fresh somewhere else. But something Samuel wrote in his letter kept pulling her back. The property is for your heart. Travis was already there, counting register money with the obsessive precision of someone who measured worth in nickels. He glanced up when she entered. His expression, the usual mix of disapproval and tolerance. "You're late yesterday, got you written up," he said, without preamble. "Do it again and—" Travis. Emma's voice was steady in a way it had never been with him before. "I need to speak with you privately." Now, something in her tone made him look up sharply. She led him to the cramped office that smelled of stale coffee and old receipts, closing the door behind them. Marcus had provided her with copies of everything: property deed, corporate documents, legal letters establishing her ownership. She laid them on the desk between them. Travis's face cycled through expressions like a slideshow of catastrophe. Confusion, then disbelief, then panic, then rage that turned his neck splotchy red. "This is some kind of scam," he managed, his voice strangled. "You can't just, this isn't." Emma held up her phone, Marcus already on speaker. The lawyer's calm voice filled the tiny office, confirming every impossible detail. Emma Crawford owned the property. Emma Crawford owned the business. Emma Crawford was effectively Travis Morrison's boss, had been his boss for the past 4 days. The color drained from Travis's face in stages. Outside the office, the morning staff had arrived: Brenda, the cook, 2 other waitresses. The thin walls meant they'd heard everything. When Emma opened the door, she found them frozen in various states of shock, staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "Travis," Emma said quietly, "You're fired. Effective immediately. There's documentation of wage theft going back 3 years. Marcus will be in touch regarding restitution." Travis opened his mouth, closed it, then grabbed his jacket and left without another word. The staff remained frozen, uncertain whether they'd just witnessed liberation or execution. Brenda found her voice first. She'd worked at Sal's for 8 years, had witnessed Emma's daily kindness to the old man, had mocked it more than once. Now she stood by the coffee station, her arms crossed defensively, her face caught between fear and something that might have been shame. "So what now?" Her voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "You gonna fire us all? Bring in your own people? Clean house like some corporate takeover?" The other staff members watched, their faces reflecting the same question. Jobs were scarce in this neighborhood. Sal's paid minimum wage, but it paid consistently. Losing it meant unemployment, eviction, catastrophe. Emma looked at them, really looked at them, seeing clearly for the first time the same exhaustion she'd carried for years. Single mothers working double shifts, students trying to afford community college, people one crisis away from the street. "No one is getting fired," she said, and meant it with every cell in her body. "Sal's runs because of you. I don't know how to manage inventory, negotiate with suppliers, or handle health inspections. I barely know how the walk-in freezer's thermostat works." She gestured to the cook. "Marcus, you've been working that grill for 12 years. Brenda, you know every regular's order and preference. You've kept this place alive through 3 managers and endless corporate neglect. I just serve coffee." The tension in the room shifted slightly, suspicion giving way to cautious hope. "Here's what I do know," Emma continued. "Everyone's getting a raise, effective today. We're implementing profit sharing. Full health benefits start next month. And I'm going to need your help figuring out how to run this place the way it deserves to be run. Like it matters. Like the people who work here matter." Before anyone could respond, the industrial oven chose that moment to die with a grinding sound that promised expensive repairs. The lunch rush was 90 minutes away. Marcus the cook looked at Emma with an expression that said this was the test, not speeches about raises, but crisis management when the pressure hit. Emma pulled out her phone. 3 calls later, she'd found a commercial repair service willing to come immediately for triple the normal rate. The cost made her wince, $2, $400 for emergency service. But she authorized it without hesitation. Then she tied on an apron and took position at the grill alongside Marcus. "Show me what to do," she said simply. They worked the lunch rush together. Emma following Marcus's instructions, burning hash browns twice, oversalting eggs once, but staying present, staying helpful, not disappearing into an office or behind wealth that could have bought her distance from the work. The staff watched her sweat over the grill she now owned, serving customers in a diner that was legally hers, choosing to be present rather than absent. By 2 p.m., when the emergency repair technician finished, something had shifted. They didn't trust her yet. Trust took time. But they'd seen enough to believe she might be different. She'd earned respect through humility. Proven character could coexist with power. Samuel would have been proud. The lawsuit arrived 6 days later, delivered by process server to Sal's diner during the breakfast rush. Emma signed for it with hands that had finally stopped shaking, read the first page, and felt the brief piece of the past week shatter like cheap glass. Hartley versus Crawford. Petition to contest will based on undue influence, mental incompetence, and coercion. Brandon had moved fast, assembling a legal team that charged hourly rates Emma couldn't have imagined a month ago. The complaint read like character assassination rendered in legal language, painting Emma as a predator who'd manipulated a vulnerable elderly man, exploiting his loneliness and diminished capacity for personal gain. The media found the story irresistible. Local news ran it that evening. Waitress inherits $47 million fortune under suspicious circumstances. Brandon had given interviews, playing the grieving nephew victimized by a con artist who'd stolen his family's legacy. "My uncle would never give his life's work to a stranger," he told Channel 4, his face arranged in practiced sorrow. "We're heartbroken that someone took advantage of him in his final months. We just want justice for Uncle Samuel." The comment section split predictably, half calling Emma a gold digger, half defending her as a real-life Cinderella story. But public opinion was a currency Brandon understood better than Emma ever would. He had the family name, The connections, the sympathetic narrative of inheritance theft. Emma's legal bills mounted daily. Marcus's firm was excellent but expensive, and Brandon's strategy seemed designed to bleed her resources through endless motions and depositions and procedural warfare. The $250,000 that had felt like freedom was evaporating into attorney fees. Marcus warned her during a strategy meeting. This could take years. Brandon's team will drag it out, hoping you'll settle just to end the fight. And if we lose, if any judge finds even a hint of undue influence, everything goes into probate. The estate gets frozen while they untangle the mess. How long? Emma asked. 5 years minimum, maybe 10. Emma thought of Samuel's letter, of Rebecca's dream, of the mission she'd been given. A decade of legal battles meant a decade of the empire sitting dormant, of kindness delayed until lawyers finished arguing about deserving. If you're watching right now, ask yourself, would you fight? Or would you walk away while you still could? Marcus spread documents across the conference room table like a general planning warfare. They have advantages, he said bluntly. Family name, social connections, the sympathy that comes with being the rightful heirs. We can't outspend them. Brandon's burning through his trust fund on legal fees, but he's got deep pockets backing him. And we can't outvote the court of public opinion when half of Milwaukee thinks you're a con artist. So what do? Emma's voice was steadier than she felt. We outmaneuver them with truth. Marcus pulled out a different document, an invitation to the Hartley Restaurant Group annual shareholder meeting, scheduled for 3 weeks out. This is public record. Open meeting. All stakeholders, board members, investors present. Media allowed. I don't understand. Brandon's been playing this as a private family matter violated by an outsider. We make it public. Force him to defend his claims in front of everyone who knew Samuel, everyone who built the company, everyone who has a stake in how this resolves. Emma's stomach nodded. You want me to speak at a shareholder meeting? In front of hundreds of people. I want you to tell the truth, Marcus said. No corporate language, no legal posturing. Just the story of what happened in that diner. Use Samuel's own words from the letter. Show them the documentary evidence. And make Brandon defend his version publicly, in front of the same people he's been privately lobbying. And if I fail? Marcus's expression was grave. Then everything goes to probate, and we fight this for a decade. But Emma, you won't fail. Samuel chose you for a reason. He knew exactly what he was doing. Trust that. The risk was total. The stakes were everything. But walking away had never been an option. The Pfister Hotel ballroom looked like a cathedral built to worship wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast light across marble floors. 200 people filled chairs arranged in precise rows. Board members in the front. Investors scattered throughout. Media representatives hovering near the back with cameras and notepads. The air smelled of expensive cologne and anticipation. This was Brandon's territory. He'd attended these meetings for 15 years, knew every major shareholder by name, had the home field advantage of familiarity and family legacy. He sat in the front row, flanked by his legal team, looking comfortable in the way people do when they're certain they belong. Emma arrived wearing the first suit she'd ever owned, purchased 3 days ago with money that still felt borrowed from someone else's life. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, the heels unfamiliar after years of sneakers designed for 12-hour shifts. She'd practiced her speech in the mirror until the words sounded almost natural. But walking into this room made every rehearsed line evaporate from her memory. The whispers started immediately. People leaned toward neighbors, murmuring behind hands. She felt their eyes cataloging her. The waitress who'd inherited a fortune, the stranger claiming their empire, the interloper who didn't belong in rooms like this. Brandon noticed her entrance. He stood, crossing the space between them with the confidence of someone playing for an audience he'd already won. Miss Crawford. His voice carried just far enough. So glad you could join us. Enjoy it while it lasts. The threat was wrapped in courtesy, delivered with a smile that promised consequences. Emma's hand shook. Her mouth had gone dry. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear, to let lawyers handle this in courtrooms where she wouldn't have to face the judgment of hundreds. But Samuel's letter was in her jacket pocket. Rebecca's dream was on the line. She walked to the podium. Emma's hands gripped the podium hard enough to leave marks in the wood. 200 faces watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. The microphone amplified her breathing, making her nervousness audible to everyone. She'd prepared corporate language, practiced smooth transitions, rehearsed the kind of speech that belonged in rooms like this. Instead, she told the truth. "My name is Emma Crawford." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. 5 months ago, I met a man named Samuel Hartley. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he was wealthy or powerful, or that he'd built the company you all work for. I just knew he was hungry. The room had gone completely quiet. Even the media had stopped shuffling. He came into Sal's diner every morning at 6:15. Always booth 7. He ordered dry toast and coffee because that's all he could afford, or all he pretended he could afford. And every morning I brought him extra food, eggs, bacon, hash browns. I told him the kitchen made mistakes. I told him it would go to waste otherwise. I lied because I knew he wouldn't accept charity. I couldn't watch someone go hungry when I had the power to help. Emma's eyes found Brandon in the front row. His expression had shifted from confident to uncertain. My manager threatened to fire me. My coworkers mocked me. I was broke, drowning in my mother's medical bills, working doubles just to survive. But I fed him anyway, not because I expected anything, not because anyone was watching, just because it was right. She pulled Samuel's letter from her pocket, unfolding it with trembling hands. Except someone was watching, and he left me a message about what real wealth means. Subscribe now, because what happens next changes everything. Emma finished reading Samuel's letter aloud, her voice breaking on the final lines. The silence that followed felt sacred, like the moment after prayer when no one wants to be the first to speak. Marcus stood, breaking the spell with the methodical precision of someone who'd planned this moment carefully. He approached the podium with a cart loaded with evidence. 17 years of Samuel's life distilled into documents and proof. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of courtroom authority. Mr. Hartley kept detailed journals. 17 years of entries documenting his search for someone worthy of carrying forward his daughter's vision. He projected images onto the screen behind Emma. Pages from Samuel's handwriting. Entries dated and specific. Day 47. She gave her lunch to homeless veteran outside diner. Went hungry herself rather than let someone suffer. Didn't tell anyone. Another entry. Month 3. Manager threatened termination. She continued anyway. Character under pressure reveals truth. The security footage came next, grainy but clear, showing months of Emma's morning ritual. Serving extra food. Leaving her father's jacket. Small acts of kindness documented with the precision of someone building a legal case for goodness. Then Marcus shifted targets. Financial records show Brandon Hartley embezzled $340,000 from corporate accounts between 2019 and 2023. Kyle Hartley defaulted on $180,000 in personal loans, using the family name to secure credit he never intended to repay. Patricia Hartley Morrison visited Samuel twice in 10 years. Both visits followed by requests for money totaling $275,000. The screen filled with bank statements, loan documents, email trails. Documentary proof of greed rendered in spreadsheets and transaction histories. The family claims Miss Crawford manipulated a vulnerable man, Marcus continued, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. The evidence shows the exact opposite. Samuel Hartley spent 17 years observing, testing, documenting. He found exactly what he was looking for. Someone who chose kindness when it cost everything and expected nothing in return. Brandon had gone pale. Patricia stared at the floor. Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear. The room buzzed with whispers, the narrative shifting in real time from gold digger to something else entirely. Vindication. Emma took the microphone again, her hand steadier now, her voice finding strength in Samuel's words still echoing in the room. "I'm proposing the Rebecca Hartley Foundation," she said clearly. 20% of all portfolio proceeds will fund community programs, feeding the homeless, hiring struggling individuals, supporting medical debt relief for families drowning in bills they can't pay. We'll transform this company back into what Rebecca envisioned, a business that measures success in people served, not profits extracted. She looked directly at Brandon, offering what Samuel had offered her, a choice. You can help build something meaningful. Honor your uncle's actual wishes instead of the inheritance you imagined. Or you can contest this in court for the next decade and lose everything: the money, the reputation, the chance to be part of something that matters. The room held its breath. Samuel gave me freedom, property, and responsibility, Emma continued. I'm offering you redemption. Help me make this company about kindness again. Help me prove that wealth can serve humanity instead of the other way around. She stepped back from the podium. The choice was his. The room waited. The oldest board member stood first, Gerald Winchester, 82 years old, who'd worked alongside Samuel since 1975. He'd watched the empire rise, watched Rebecca's vision get corrupted, watched Samuel retreat into searching. Samuel spent 17 years searching for this moment, Gerald said, his voice thick with emotion. Searching for someone who understood what his daughter knew: that character matters more than capital, that kindness is the only currency that appreciates over time. He started clapping, slow, deliberate, the sound carrying across marble floors and crystal chandeliers. One by one, the room rose. Board members, investors, employees who'd known Samuel, people who remembered Rebecca. The applause built like thunder, wave after wave of affirmation washing over Emma until she had to grip the podium to stay standing. Brandon sat alone, surrounded by standing ovation, his legal team gathering papers in defeat. The vote was unanimous. Emma Crawford confirmed as portfolio executor. The lawsuit withdrawn before the meeting adjourned. Victory achieved not through power or money, but through character proven under pressure. Samuel would have been proud. 6 months later, Sal's Diner reopened after renovations that honored its history instead of erasing it. The red vinyl booths had been restored, not replaced. The checkered floor tiles gleamed with fresh polish but kept their worn patterns, scars earned through decades of service. The ancient coffee maker still sputtered and hissed, because some things were too perfect to fix. Booth 7 held a bronze plaque mounted on the wall, in memory of Samuel James Hartley, who saw what others missed. 1951 to 2025. The staff had been promoted, not replaced. Brenda wore a general manager's nameplate with pride she'd earned through competence, not charity. Marcus the cook was training apprentices, passing forward skills he'd perfected over 15 years. Everyone earned living wages, received health benefits, and shared in profits they helped generate. The Rebecca Hartley Foundation launched with a waiting list 400 families long, people drowning in medical debt, struggling with homelessness, one crisis away from catastrophe. Emma had hired staff who understood poverty not as theory but as lived experience, who brought empathy forged through survival. The foundation's motto carved above the entrance: kindness first. The diner's new tagline printed on every menu: where everyone matters. Samuel's empire had found its heart again.